Good day, and welcome to Montpelier. You find me revisiting some of the many notes, letters, and pamphlets and gazettes that were written and disseminated during the course of the formation of our new government under the U.S. Constitution. Upon review of these many letters, it strikes me the necessity of a well-informed and well-educated citizenry to ensure the success of our new government and its continuation for subsequent generations. Perhaps we may have an opportunity to discuss these and other matters at length, but for the moment, my duties do require me to return to my work. You will excuse me, and thank you for visiting Montpelier.
My name is Michael Quinn. I'm the president of the Montpelier Foundation, the steward of James Madison's home in Orange, Virginia. You've just heard from James Madison, the father of the Constitution, telling us the importance of an educated citizenry for his great experiment in self-government. It has been more than 2 centuries since Madison's leadership created the Constitution. While our world is much different from Madison's, one thing has not changed: the need for an educated citizenry for America to continue. We're now celebrating the 223rd anniversary of the creation of the Constitution. On September 17th in 1787, James Madison and the other members of the Constitutional Convention signed the Constitution, presenting it to the American people as their collective vision to establish the United States. On this anniversary, James Madison's Montpelier is proud to continue its examination of the state of the Constitution, this time looking at what Americans know about the Constitution itself. The United States was founded on the idea that a nation's people can govern themselves. This sounds simple, yet all previous attempts at self-government, and many subsequent ones, have ended in failure. Today, America is the longest enduring democracy in the world, and self-government is acknowledged as the most successful basis for a modern nation to achieve stability and freedom for its people. We all know the Constitution begins with the words, "We the people," but rarely do we consider what those words mean. The Constitution begins with those words because it is us, the American people, who are the creators of our nation and the source of governmental authority. This is a legacy entrusted to us by the founders. It is also a responsibility. Each generation of Americans has a responsibility to learn and uphold the principles of the Constitution. We encourage Americans to observe Constitution Day by reading the Constitution, and we invite you to learn about James and Dolly Madison by visiting their restored home, Montpelier, in Orange, Virginia. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Sean O'Brien, Executive Director for the Center for the Constitution at James Madison's Montpelier, to review the results of a new survey, What Americans Know.
In the summer of 2010, with funding from the Claude Moore Charitable Foundation, the Center for the Constitution at James Madison's Montpelier conducted a survey of Americans' understanding of the Constitution and their attitudes towards the structure and function of our government. This survey, The State of the Constitution, What Americans Know, is the subject of today's presentation. The survey was conducted with input from a dozen constitutional scholars and the assistance of Professor Quentin Kidd from Christopher Newport University and the Institute of Public Opinion at Muhlenberg College. A total of 988 live, random telephone surveys of people 18 and older living in the United States were conducted in July 2010, with a resulting margin of error of plus or minus 3.1%. The mission of the Center for the Constitution at Montpelier is to increase the knowledge and understanding of the founding principles and constitutional ideals of the United States. We do this primarily through seminars hosted at Montpelier, the home of James Madison. We undertook this survey to better understand what the general public knows and what they need to know better. Many of the survey results are quite encouraging. We found that only about 6% of the population reported not knowing much about the Constitution, while 79% reported knowing a lot or some about it. However, like in so many of the responses, these broad brush results hide important details about specific groups of Americans. The survey included standard demographic questions about age, education level, race, political affiliation, and gender, so we were able to examine the data more carefully. For example, 31% of the people report knowing a lot about the Constitution. Only half as many young people aged 18 to 24 report knowing a lot. This is quite disheartening, given that many young people are more likely to have just finished or even still be in their formal education. We might conclude that this is simply a reflection of self-doubt about their knowledge, except that in most cases, young people across the country were, in fact, less knowledgeable and had a lower sense of civic duty than older people. On the question of natural rights was one of the founders' most fundamental beliefs, yet only around 2/3, 68%, of the people believe that their rights, such as free speech and freedom of religion, are natural rights. One of the key innovations in the Constitution is rooted in its opening phrase, "We the people," which establishes that the power vested in our government comes from the people themselves. The founders would be distressed to know that half the people today think the source of governmental authority comes from elected officials, and only 48% think it comes from the people. On the question of limited government, the founders were very concerned that the national government not become too powerful, and it is discouraging that while 88% think limited government is very important, only 35% of Americans believe that the Constitution specifically limits the power of government. Democrats are much more likely than Republicans to believe that the government's power is limited by the Constitution by a margin of 46% to 30%. When asked if the government is empowered to act for the common good, less than half the respondents think that this is true, with a sharp divide between the political parties. More than half the Republicans do not believe that it is a basic constitutional tenet, while nearly 2/3 of Democrats believe that the government is empowered to act for the common good. On the question of do people read the Constitution, while the vast majority of Americans, 86%, believe that the Constitution is important in their daily lives, less than 1/3 have taken the time to read all or even most of the Constitution. The Constitution is a mere 4,400 words, the equivalent of a 17-page novel, and the shortest constitution of any major government. While 28% of Americans report having read all of the Constitution, half as many young people report having read the whole Constitution, and 18 to 24-year-olds have the highest reported level of having read none of the Constitution. Generally low levels of familiarity with the Constitution are matched by a discouraging lack of knowledge about some basic functions of the federal government that are clearly laid out in the Constitution. For example, about 90% of the people know that the federal government makes money in treaties, but somehow more than 10% of Americans are either not sure or believe it is the job of state governments to make and regulate money in America. Not surprisingly, it is the lack of knowledge among young people that pulls this number up. Given the discouraging levels of knowledge among young people, one must wonder if the educational system in the United States is meeting the civic education needs of the future of our nation. Perhaps, given their relative lack of understanding of the Constitution, it is not surprising that young people also have little faith in the Constitution. Our survey asked the question, is it time for a new Constitution? To which 88% of the people said no, the Constitution still works today. However, when considered by age and race, another story emerges. An amazing 38% of 18 to 24-year-olds believe the United States needs a new Constitution. A similar percentage, 36% of African Americans also believe this. What is striking about this finding is that African Americans and whites are comparable on most measures of knowledge of the Constitution, as well as the importance of voting and most characteristics of good citizenship. The primary difference between whites and blacks is that more than 90% of whites think the Constitution still works, while only 64% of African Americans think it does. Interestingly, African Americans believe that their First Amendment right of participating in a protest or demonstration is an important characteristic of good citizenship. African Americans believe in the power of protest at more than twice the rate of whites, 42% compared to 19%. Our survey found that although people believe in important constitutional principles like separation of church and state, separation of powers, and the rule of law, their understanding of the Constitution at a deeper level and their willingness to engage in learning about the Constitution is lacking. Given that the Constitution defines our nation and us as a people, we are encouraged that people believe in core principles, but we would hope they would be willing to engage in thoughtful study as well. At the Center for the Constitution, we believe the power of the Constitution comes from the people, but no person is born with an innate understanding of constitutional ideals. Instead, each of us must learn its meaning, understand its significance, and commit to its continuation. We are encouraged that most Americans are aware of key ideals that James Madison and the other founders built into the Constitution. Moreover, they believe these ideals are important. Interestingly, Madison was afraid that the Bill of Rights would be merely a parchment barrier to government abuse. What we found was that the values built into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights permeate society such that even people who do not have a deep understanding and have not studied the Constitution, they are still committed to those constitutional principles. Nevertheless, we must heed the words of James Madison when he wrote, "We must arm ourselves with the power which knowledge gives, because a popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or both." The Center for the Constitution at James Madison's Montpelier strives to answer Madison's call for education about the Constitution. Our programs are designed to help stewards of the Constitution, people such as teachers, elected officials, judges, and police officers, achieve new levels of knowledge and understanding. We also hold seminars for the general public, seminars which will answer your questions about the constitutional principles covered in the survey. Please visit our website for complete survey results and to learn more about the seminars. Thank you for your time.